Have you ever noticed that some people seem unstoppable by noon, while others are already drained before the day even begins? Here's a truth many don't realize. The way you show up at 6 a.m. doesn't just affect your morning, it decides whether you win or lose the entire day. The first key point is the power of the first hour of your day. It is a quiet battlefield, invisible to most, yet it shapes everything that follows. Imagine a painter standing before a blank canvas. Every stroke matters. And the first stroke sets the rhythm, the mood, the color of the entire painting. That is what your first hour does for your day. If you stumble out of bed, distracted by notifications or the noise of the world, the rest of the day reacts to that stumble. But if you approach it with intention, even in the smallest actions, you are already ahead of everyone who waits for the world to push them forward. I know a young woman who woke up one morning at 6 a.m. every day for a month to simply walk around her neighborhood with no phone, no plan, just noticing the light and the air. By the end of the month, she told me she had solved problems at work that had frustrated her for years. She said, "I didn't change my job, I didn't change my boss, I changed the first hour of my day." That hour became her invisible edge. There is something magical about stillness before sunrise. The air feels sharper, the sounds quieter, as if the world is holding its breath. When you wake at this hour, you are given a choice most people miss: to decide your rhythm instead of following the rhythm of others. Think of it like tuning an instrument before a concert. If you skip it, the music will sound off-key no matter how skilled you are. That first hour tunes your mind, your emotions, and your focus. I remember meeting a man who had failed multiple business ventures. His mornings were chaotic, filled with rushing and reacting. One morning, out of desperation, he started journaling for 20 minutes immediately after waking. That small act didn't make him rich overnight, but it reshaped how he approached every conversation, every decision, every risk. The first hour became the metronome for his life, and he told me later that nothing he did after 6 a.m. felt accidental. It all felt intentional. Many of us underestimate how much the first hour defines our inner dialogue. When you roll over and scroll social media, you feed your mind fragments of other people's lives, arguments, achievements, complaints, and then wonder why you feel unmotivated or anxious. Your morning thoughts are the seeds that grow into the forest of your day. I once knew a teacher who refused to check her email or phone until she had read a single page of a book and written one line of gratitude. She said it felt like planting a tree every morning. Even if the day was chaotic, she carried that rooted calm with her, and her students, unknowingly, thrived in it too. The first hour, she realized, wasn't just about productivity. It was about sovereignty over her own mind before it could be invaded. The first hour also carries the quiet opportunity to confront your own fears and doubts before the world forces its agenda upon you. Most people wake up and immediately try to outrun a to-do list that was created by someone else or dictated by circumstance. But in those early hours, you have a chance to face the questions that haunt you. What am I avoiding? Who am I trying to please? Where am I giving away my energy without realizing it? I met a man who used to wake up exhausted, dragging himself to a factory job. One morning, instead of heading to the bus, he walked into an empty coffee shop and wrote for an hour about what he truly wanted from life. That hour changed everything. He didn't start a business immediately, but every choice afterward was guided by that hour of clarity. And eventually, it became the path that led him to a career he loved. Action in the first hour, even tiny action, compounds in ways most people never notice. Drinking water, stretching, reading, or planning a single priority may seem insignificant, but it sends a signal to your brain that you are awake, alert, and capable. It's like dropping a pebble into a still pond. The ripples reach far beyond where the pebble lands. A friend of mine, a nurse working 12-hour shifts, started meditating for 10 minutes every morning at 6 a.m. It seemed trivial, but she noticed that she stayed calm during emergencies. listened more deeply to her patients, and handled stress with surprising ease. The small, intentional act in the first hour became the foundation of a resilient mindset that carried her through the most chaotic days of her career. The first hour also creates space for imagination, reflection, and perspective, luxuries that the rest of the day rarely allows. In the quiet, you can dream, problem solve, or simply notice what is working and what isn't. One morning, a struggling writer I know sat with a notebook by the window, watching the sunrise. In that hour, she sketched an outline for a story that would later win an award. She told me that it wasn't the idea itself, but the mindset she created in that hour, a space where possibilities felt endless, that made all the difference. By starting her day early, she claimed a small kingdom of time that no distraction could steal. Finally, the first hour of the day is a mirror. It reflects your discipline, your priorities, and your capacity to show up for yourself. It exposes where you let comfort outweigh courage, where indecision outweighs action, and where excuses overpower your potential. Yet it is also the hour that allows you to rewrite those patterns. I recall an entrepreneur who would snooze his alarm repeatedly, telling himself he was resting for creativity. When he finally forced himself to rise at 6 a.m. and take one step toward his goals, he discovered that momentum is contagious. The morning moved with him, not against him. Each decision, each thought, each action flowed naturally from that first hour, shaping the rhythm, the energy, and ultimately the results of his entire day. The second key point is control your mind, don't let it control you. Your mind is a river, constantly flowing, sometimes calm, sometimes raging, and most of the time unnoticed. If you drift with it without awareness, you end up carried to places you never intended to go. I knew a man who spent his mornings reacting to emails, messages, and news notifications before he even drank water. By noon, he felt drained, anxious, and powerless. One day, he tried something different. He sat quietly for 15 minutes after waking, observing the thoughts passing through his head without judgment. For the first time in years, he realized he had been giving away his mornings to whatever popped into his consciousness first, like leaves floating down a stream. That morning, he decided to steer the river instead of floating helplessly on it. The mind has a curious way of magnifying small fears into mountains. That email that seems urgent, that comment that feels critical, the worry about the future, each is a pebble, but when left unchecked, they pile into landslides. A friend of mine, an artist struggling to finish a project, told me she felt trapped by her own thoughts. She would wake up with a nagging voice reminding her of every mistake she had ever made. But when she learned to pause and write down those thoughts first thing in the morning, they lost their power. The act of naming them, seeing them on paper, gave her control. She discovered that her mind was not an enemy to be battled, but a tool to be guided, and suddenly the day was hers to direct. Our minds are easily hijacked by patterns we don't even notice. The man who jumps out of bed and immediately checks social media is surrendering his mental steering wheel to the world. The teenager who wakes up replaying every insecurity before brushing teeth is handing the day's power to fear. I met a teacher who decided to practice a tiny ritual. Before speaking to anyone, she would take 3 conscious breaths and ask herself, which thoughts will I give energy to today? That simple pause transformed her interactions. She became less reactive, more present, and far more influential than before. Control is not about suppressing thoughts. It is about deciding which ones deserve to guide your actions. There is a deep difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is instinctive, unconscious, and often counterproductive. Responding requires awareness, patience, and intentionality. Early in his career, a young executive I knew would fire off emails in frustration, only to regret them later. He started practicing mindfulness for 10 minutes every morning. He didn't silence his mind, he learned to observe it. to notice the impulses before they became actions. Weeks later, he told me that he felt like a different person at work. He had discovered the freedom of choosing his responses instead of being trapped by the first thought that came into his head. The mind can also be a stubborn echo chamber of past failures, regrets, and doubts. Every morning it whispers, "You're not ready," or "You'll fail again." Most people believe these whispers because they are persistent. But a writer I once met found that when she woke up and immediately recited one intentional thought of belief, simply stating, "I am capable of progress today," her mind slowly stopped echoing the doubts. It didn't happen overnight, but the morning ritual became her armor. She was not changing reality instantly. She was claiming control over her internal narrative before it dictated her external world. Discipline of the mind requires repetition, not punishment. Trying to force yourself into positivity or focus rarely works. It's like trying to shove a river into a canal with your hands. Instead, notice the current, place small stones to guide it, redirect it gently. I knew a man who struggled with chronic worry about work deadlines. Each morning he wrote down one single task he could complete in that hour and focused only on it. Gradually it trained his mind to concentrate, to move from chaos to clarity. The transformation wasn't dramatic at first, but over months his mornings became a fortress of calm, a place where he could decide what mattered rather than letting his mind decide for him. Finally, controlling your mind is not about perfection. It is about presence. It is about noticing when you are drifting, when thoughts are running unchecked, and gently returning to choice. A grandmother I knew would rise at 5:45 each morning, sit on her porch, and watch the sunrise. She didn't meditate in a structured way. She didn't recite affirmations. She simply paid attention to her breath and the world waking up. She told me, "If I don't do this, my mind runs me. If I do, I run my mind." That simple recognition, that awareness, allowed her to carry calm, clarity, and purpose into every conversation, every chore, and every challenge of the day. Controlling your mind is less about bending it and more about walking alongside it, noticing where it wants to go, and gently steering it toward the life you actually want. The third key point is small wins, massive momentum. Too often we look at our goals and feel overwhelmed by their size, as if the distance to success is measured in mountains rather than steps. But the truth is, the day doesn't bend to grand gestures. It bends to tiny intentional victories stacked one after another. I knew a man who wanted to run a marathon but couldn't even jog a block without stopping. He decided to start with 1 minute of running each morning. It seemed insignificant at first, almost laughable, yet each small run built something deeper than stamina. It built belief. By the time he ran 5 minutes, his mind had begun to trust his body, and by the time he ran 30, he was unstoppable. That first minute mattered more than he realized, because momentum doesn't wait for perfection, it waits for action. Momentum is deceptive in its subtlety. You don't feel it growing until suddenly everything begins to move faster than before. A young woman I met had struggled with writing for years, staring at blank pages in frustration. She committed to writing a single sentence every morning at 6 a.m. A sentence, that's it. At first, she questioned whether it was worth it, but 3 weeks in, she noticed her ideas flowing in the afternoons without struggle. One sentence had become paragraphs, paragraphs had become pages, pages had become a completed draft. The small, consistent effort in the quiet hours had created a rhythm that carried her forward, like a snowball rolling down a hill, slowly at first, then impossible to stop. Small wins are not just about productivity, they are about belief. Every time you take action when your instinct is to hesitate, every time you choose effort over comfort, you are telling your mind, your heart, and even the universe that you are capable. A high school teacher I knew encouraged his students to solve one extra problem in math every morning. To them, it seemed minor, almost trivial. But within weeks, their confidence skyrocketed. Their minds began to trust themselves, and the results extended far beyond math. They approached challenges in other subjects, in sports, in life, with the same quiet confidence. Small wins breed trust, and trust is the invisible engine of momentum. There is a hidden law in life: energy flows where attention goes. The small victories you earn in the first hours of your day act as magnets for energy and focus. I met an entrepreneur who dreaded mornings, feeling powerless against deadlines. He began his days by clearing one small email, then organizing his desk, then listing 3 priorities. Each tiny win made the next task easier, and before long, the morning that had once drained him now fueled him. Energy compounded like interest in a bank account. Momentum is not about rushing. It is about stacking effort so the rhythm carries you forward almost effortlessly. Small wins also dissolve fear brick by brick. Fear grows in the dark, in the space where inaction lives. Every time you take a deliberate step, you shine a light and the fear shrinks. I knew a musician terrified of performing live. He started with 1 audience member, his younger sister, then 2, then 5, then 10. Each small intentional exposure didn't just improve his skill, it rewired his nervous system. The momentum of repeated manageable steps transformed dread into anticipation. The mountain of fear never disappeared, but he no longer needed to see the peak to keep climbing. Small wins teach patience and presence because they demand consistency over flash. There was a runner who wanted to improve her speed. She could have sprinted and burned out in a week, or she could start with 100 meters a day, gradually increasing. She chose the latter. The improvement was slow, almost imperceptible at first, but each morning she celebrated the distance she ran. Each small win reinforced the idea that growth is a process, not a single moment. Momentum, she discovered, is patient. It doesn't rush, it doesn't demand perfection. It simply rewards steady, committed action. Finally, small wins become a mirror that shows you what you are capable of when you choose action over inertia. I remember a young man paralyzed by self-doubt, convinced he could never be consistent in his career or health. He started with a single push-up, a single page of a book, a single call to a client he had been avoiding. By the end of the month, the accumulation of these tiny victories transformed his perception of himself. Momentum, once invisible, became palpable. He realized that greatness is not a single moment of brilliance. It is the quiet accumulation of choices, repeated day after day, until suddenly the impossible feels inevitable. The 4th key point is energy is your true current. Sigh. Most of us treat energy as if it's limitless, spending it carelessly on distractions, worries, or tasks that don't matter, only to discover by midday that we have none left for what truly counts. I once met a chef who worked 14-hour days, constantly putting out fires in the kitchen, yet he never paused to nourish his own body or mind in the morning. By 2 p.m., he felt drained, irritable, and ineffective, despite the hours he had invested. When he began dedicating just 30 minutes each morning to a simple routine, stretching, water, and intentional focus, he told me his whole day shifted. Energy, he realized, wasn't about doing more, it was about preserving and directing what you had. Energy is subtle, invisible, yet it dictates everything we do. Think of it like the electricity in a house. No matter how beautiful the rooms are, if the power is off, nothing functions. I knew a woman working in a high-pressure startup who spent her mornings checking messages and responding to crises. She felt productive, but by noon she was exhausted and making mistakes. When she decided to spend the first hour of her day in quiet reflection and light movement, she discovered something astonishing. The same 8 hours felt twice as long, twice as effective. Her energy was not created by doing more. It was unlocked by being deliberate with what she already had. We often misunderstand productivity, confusing it with busyness. True productivity comes from energy management, not time management. I met a father of three who struggled to get through his mornings without snapping at his children or coworkers. He started waking 30 minutes earlier just to drink tea and watch the sunrise, feeling the calm before the world woke up. He didn't check email, he didn't scroll social media, he simply allowed himself to arrive. Within weeks, he noticed his patience, focus, and creativity in the office had doubled. Energy spent wisely amplifies results, while energy squandered in reaction depletes potential. Energy is also deeply tied to the mind. A restless, anxious mind consumes far more energy than physical work ever could. I knew a young writer paralyzed by fear of failure. She would stay in bed, replaying every doubt and mistake from yesterday, feeling exhausted before the day began. One morning, she committed to a short meditation and a brisk walk at 6 a.m. That simple ritual didn't just calm her thoughts, it replenished her energy reserves. Suddenly, she could write for hours without fatigue, and the ideas flowed freely. Energy, she realized, is more than physical stamina. It is the quiet fuel of clarity, creativity, and resilience. Your energy is also contagious. When you carry it intentionally, it influences everything around you. I remember a teacher who began starting his day with simple breathing exercises and a walk around the school before students arrived. Within days, colleagues and students alike felt the difference. Meetings ran smoother, classrooms were calmer, and challenges seemed smaller. Energy is not a solitary asset, it radiates outward. Every choice you make with awareness in the morning amplifies not just your day, but the experience of those you interact with. Neglecting energy in favor of urgent tasks is like trying to drive a car with an empty tank. You may move for a while, but eventually you stall in the middle of the road. A friend of mine, a software engineer, spent years running from deadline to deadline, thinking exhaustion was proof of effort. He began experimenting with a short energy routine, hydration, sunlight, and stretching before work. He found that he achieved more in the first 3 hours of the day than he used to in 8. Energy is not about adding hours, it is about ensuring that the hours you have count. Finally, energy reveals what we truly value. If you are constantly tired, overwhelmed, or distracted, it is a signal that something is draining you unnecessarily. I knew a man who woke up each morning feeling frustrated, blaming traffic, work, and obligations. He decided to monitor his energy instead of his schedule. He discovered that skipping breakfast, rushing out the door, and immediately checking work messages was the real culprit. When he shifted his morning to protect his energy, he became calmer, sharper, and more engaged. Energy is the currency of life, and how you spend it in the first hour determines the richness of everything that follows. The fifth key point is silence before the storm. There is a special kind of stillness in the early hours, a quiet that is easily overlooked because the world hasn't yet demanded anything from you. It's not emptiness, it's opportunity. I knew a man who ran a small business and was constantly overwhelmed by emails, calls, and client demands. One morning, on a whim, he woke an hour earlier than usual and sat on his balcony, listening to nothing but the wind and the distant hum of the city. He didn't check his phone, he didn't plan his day. For the first time in months, he noticed ideas forming in his mind with clarity, solutions appearing without effort. That quiet became a secret workshop where he could think before reacting, creating before responding. Silence allows the mind to untangle itself. Most people wake up already carrying yesterday's chaos, unfinished conversations, mistakes, regrets. Without intentional quiet, those threads tangle into knots that follow you all day. I once met a teacher who struggled with impatience, snapping at students and colleagues without thinking. She decided to begin every morning with 5 minutes of silence, sitting with her thoughts but not clinging to them. Within a week, she felt a subtle shift. She could hear herself think, feel her own energy, and make choices before the world imposed them. The quiet acted as a filter, separating what mattered from what was noise. There is also a courage in silence. To sit with yourself before the world awakens is to face your own mind, your own doubts, without distraction. A writer I know spent years filling notebooks with unfinished stories, always waiting for inspiration. One morning, she decided to sit silently for 20 minutes, with only the sunrise as her companion. She discovered that her mind was not empty. It was full of ideas she had been ignoring. The silence allowed her to hear them. Courage, she realized, is not just about action in the world, it is about listening to the voice that has been quieted by constant noise. Silence sharpens perspective. When the world is clamoring for attention, it is easy to lose sight of priorities, to be dragged by trivialities. I met a father of two who would wake to chaos, breakfast dishes, and urgent messages. One day he rose 30 minutes early, made tea, and sat in silence by the wind. Tao. He noticed things he had never seen: the way light fell on the garden, the rhythm of his own breathing, the thoughts that usually went unexamined. In that quiet, he could plan his day not just efficiently but meaningfully, understanding which tasks required energy and which would drain it without return. Silence also acts as a sanctuary for creativity. Most ideas are drowned in the noise of phones, notifications, and obligations. A musician I knew would wake up in a house full of roommates, noise, and distractions, trying to compose. Nothing worked. One morning he woke an hour earlier, went to the roof, and listened to the city sleeping. He didn't play, he didn't write, he just observed. Within minutes, melodies and lyrics began to appear effortlessly in his mind. The quiet had become fertile soil for the seeds of imagination, where creativity could take root before the day demanded productivity. The power of silence lies in its subtle guidance. When you start the day listening, observing, and reflecting, you gain a sense of direction that no planner, alarm, or to-do list can provide. I knew a young woman who struggled with anxiety, waking to a flood of worries. She began dedicating 15 minutes each morning to sit in her room with no distractions, noticing her breath, her thoughts, her heartbeat. That small window of silence allowed her to approach challenges during the day with clarity and calm. She told me that she didn't feel like life had slowed down. She had simply started moving through it with awareness, instead of reaction. Finally, silence is a mirror. It shows you what you are carrying, what you are avoiding, and what you might be missing. I once knew a man who always rushed through mornings, coffee in hand, phone buzzing, mind racing. When he tried sitting in silence for a week, he discovered feelings, ideas, and worries he had buried under the noise of life. Some were uncomfortable, some were inspiring, but all were real. That morning ritual of stillness gave him a choice: to let these things control him, or to acknowledge them and move forward intentionally. Silence before the storm doesn't remove the storm. It prepares you to navigate it with awareness, presence, and quiet power. The sixth key point is outwork yesterday. Every morning offers a quiet challenge. Will you let the weight of yesterday define today, or will you take one step, no matter how small, toward progress? I knew a man who carried regrets like stones in his backpack, missed opportunities, harsh words, unfinished projects. He began each day replaying these memories, allowing them to dictate his mood and his choices. One morning, he decided to rise before the city stirred and write down one thing he could do better than yesterday. That single act became revolutionary. He realized that outworking yesterday didn't mean erasing mistakes. It meant proving to himself that today could be different, stronger, more intentional. Outworking yesterday is not about comparison with others. It is about personal accountability. I met a young athlete who constantly measured himself against teammates, obsessing over who was faster, stronger, or more skilled. He would leave practice feeling defeated, exhausted, and invisible. Then he started a simple ritual. Every morning, he recorded one small improvement, whether a fraction of a second shaved off a sprint or a slightly better lift. No one else needed to see it. No one else needed to approve. In weeks, the momentum shifted. By focusing on surpassing his own past, he built confidence and skill far beyond what competition alone could inspire. Every small effort to outwork yesterday compounds in ways we rarely notice. I knew a woman who wanted to learn to paint but kept putting it off because she believed she lacked talent. One morning, she picked up a brush and painted for 10 minutes. The next day, 15 minutes. Each day, a little longer, a little bolder. Later, she looked back at her earliest work and was astonished. Not because she had become a master, but because she had become herself, someone who consistently chooses progress. Outworking yesterday is the quiet rebellion against stagnation, the slow accumulation of victories that make the impossible inevitable. There is also a rhythm to surpassing your past. Life will throw distractions, temptations, and doubts at you, yet every day you rise and do one thing better than yesterday, you are creating a cadence of growth. I remember a teacher who struggled with patience in the classroom. Every morning she would reflect on one way to respond more calmly than the day before. She didn't always succeed, but she tried, and the pattern of intention slowly rewired her reactions. By the end of the month, colleagues and students noticed a transformation, not because she had changed overnight, but because she had outworked yesterday, consistently, quietly, and deliberately. Outworking yesterday also teaches resilience. I once met a musician whose first compositions were rejected repeatedly. Each rejection could have become a stopping point, a reason to give up. Instead, he made a morning promise to practice one more hour than he did yesterday, even if it was just small scales or chord progressions. Over time, those incremental steps shaped not only skill, but character. Resilience, he realized, was not inherited or spontaneous. It was built hour by hour, effort by effort, by showing up to outwork what had come before. The practice of outworking yesterday forces reflection and honesty. You must confront where you fell short, where distractions or fear stole your effort, and where excuses allowed inaction. I met a woman in business who would spend evenings lamenting missed calls and failed meetings. One morning, she began journaling a single sentence: "What can I do today to be better than yesterday?" That question became a compass. Each decision, each meeting, each email was filtered through it. By the end of the week, she noticed subtle changes, sharper focus, calmer reactions, clearer priorities. Outworking yesterday is less about dramatic leaps and more about consistent alignment with your own potential. Finally, outworking yesterday is the ultimate gift to your future self. The day you rise and push beyond your own past, you're not just shaping today, you're building a trajectory. I knew a man who struggled with health and energy for years. One morning, he committed to walking 10 minutes more than the day before. He didn't see immediate results, but by persisting, day after day, he transformed his stamina, his confidence, and even his relationships. Outworking yesterday teaches that progress is cumulative, that every small intentional choice compounds, and that the life you want is not a distant dream, but a series of deliberate actions stacked one after another, beginning each morning with the determination to be better than you were yesterday. The seventh key point is your day is a reflection of your morning. Everything that happens after sunrise is shaped by the choices you make while the world is still quiet. I once knew a young man who would wake late, stumble through breakfast, and check his phone immediately. By mid-morning, he was exhausted, stressed, and already behind. Then, on a rare morning when he woke an hour earlier, sat in silence, and mapped out just one priority, he noticed something profound. The same hours that felt chaotic yesterday were now productive, calm, and meaningful. That morning revealed a truth most ignore, that how you start is less about habit and more about setting a mirror for the rest of your day. Mornings carry subtle momentum that carries far beyond what we see. A woman I knew, a teacher, began rising at 5:30 to walk and reflect before her classes. She didn't understand the change at first. Her students still asked questions. The lessons were the same. But by mid-morning, she realized her energy, her focus, and even her patience were transformed. Her day had shifted not because the tasks were different, but because she had changed how she arrived at them. The morning, she discovered, is the blueprint of experience. It colors the decisions, interactions, and energy of the hours that follow. Every choice, even small, compounds into a narrative. A friend of mine, an entrepreneur, would check emails the moment he woke, reacting to the demands of others before tending to his own priorities. He constantly felt behind. One day he experimented with writing down one meaningful task before any external input. The effect was almost immediate. Meetings went smoother, decisions were sharper, and energy was consistent throughout the day. He told me that the morning didn't just influence his schedule, it influenced his confidence, his clarity, and even his sense of purpose. Your day doesn't begin when you arrive at work. It begins when you decide how you will show up for yourself first. The morning also exposes invisible patterns we carry. Many of us carry anxiety, hesitation, and doubt like hidden luggage, unaware of how they steer our actions. I met a young mother who often began her day stressed by small things: clothes not folded, breakfast late, chores unfinished. One morning, she chose to sit quietly with her coffee, noticing her thoughts without judgment. That small window of awareness reshaped her reactions for the rest of the day. She realized that the morning is a diagnostic tool. It reflects what your habits, priorities, and mindset truly look like before the world tests them. The power of mornings is in the choice to lead rather than follow. Most people wake reacting to notifications, to noise, to obligation, allowing their day to be dictated by external forces. I knew a man who worked in a hectic office. Each morning, he chose one small intentional act: a brisk walk, journaling, or planning a single meaningful task. That act became a touchstone, a reference point he could return to when the chaos began. By controlling his morning, he controlled his reactions, his focus, and the quality of every decision. The rest of the day, even the unpredictable parts, reflected the tone he had set before sunrise. Mornings are also a rehearsal for presence. A musician I knew would practice for hours, but only after rising early and spending 20 minutes listening to his surroundings and breath. That quiet start didn't create notes or melodies, it created readiness. He told me that his ability to improvise, connect with other musicians, and perform with confidence was not because he practiced more in general, but because he had shown up fully for himself before the world demanded it. The morning is where presence begins, and the day is merely the reflection of how fully you arrived to yourself first. Finally, the morning is a mirror of intention, energy, and clarity. I remember a student who constantly felt like life was happening to him, never with him. He experimented with a simple habit. Every morning he decided one meaningful act before engaging with the world. It could be a short walk, a journal entry, or a single deliberate choice. Over weeks he realized that the quality of his interactions, his focus in class, and even his mood were reflections of this simple commitment. Your day is not separate from your morning, it is a direct echo. What you do, how you think, and how you show up in the first hours sets the tone, the rhythm, and the quality of everything that follows. As the morning light touches your window, remember that nothing outside of you decides the quality of your day. It begins within. Every thought you nurture, every small choice you make, and every moment of awareness you claim before the world stirs, quietly shapes everything that follows. The hours ahead are not a battle to endure or a challenge to fear. They are a canvas that reflects the care, focus, and intent you bring to them. You have seen now that mornings are not merely a passage of time, they are a rehearsal for clarity, resilience, and presence. The first hour, the small victories, the energy you guard, the silence you embrace, the decisions to outwork your past, and the attention you give to how you show up all converge to create the life you experience. Each day is not separate from the person you are becoming. It is a reflection of that self in motion, quiet and steady, yet deliberate. And so, as you step into your day, there is no need for force, no need for struggle. What matters is the calm, unwavering attention you bring to the present. The mind that learns to steer itself, the energy that you tend like a precious resource, and the momentum that builds quietly through small, consistent choices will guide you far beyond what a single moment can measure. You are not defined by what has passed, nor by what is waiting outside. You are defined by the moments in which you choose awareness over distraction, presence over reaction, and intentionality over habit. Every sunrise is an invitation, not to perfection, not to grand gestures, but to a steady unfolding of the life you are capable of living. Carry this understanding with you quietly. Let it guide your steps, your decisions, and the rhythm of your day. And in that quiet carrying, you will find strength, clarity, and a kind of momentum that cannot be taken away, because it is yours from the very moment you rise.